Hi there, and welcome to your input session about concept checking using two main techniques: concept checking questions, or CCQs, and timelines. This video is going to be all about concept checking questions, and the next video in the series is all about using timelines. Okay, so let's start with a very good question we should ask ourselves quite frequently when we're teaching, and that is why. Okay, why do we ask concept check questions to our students? Just pause the video for a second, and when you're ready, when you've thought of a couple of reasons, press play. Okay, so here are some of the basic reasons why we concept check. For the teacher, as teachers, by asking questions, we can get good information about whether or not our learners have understood the language that we're trying to teach. If they get the answers right to our CCQs, then we can safely assume that they understand it. If not, we might need to re-clarify. And also, we concept check for the learners. Asking questions makes learning much more interactive, and the more involved we are with our own learning, the theory is that the more we retain, so the more we actually learn. So asking questions helps the learner really figure out what they understand, what they don't, and makes learning much more interactive. Okay, next question is when? When do we ask CCQs in our classes? There are a few examples here. For example, we might concept check when we're pre-teaching vocabulary in a reading or a listening lesson. Just 2 or 3 words which may block our learners' understanding if we don't teach them. We might use concept check questions in the clarification stage of a lesson. It could be grammar, as it says here. It could be vocabulary as well. Prior to that, we would have set up the context using some sort of a text. We might have tested what our learners know using a diagnostic test. Or we may have set up a situation which generates use of the target language. In any case, the clarification stage is going to come after setting context somehow. We might use concept check questions as well when we're clarifying language for learners more spontaneously. Students may ask, what does this mean? And we might want to ask questions to guide the learner to understanding rather than explaining it for them. Okay, so these are just some examples. There's multiple times when concept check questions are useful, and it's basically whenever we are clarifying meaning for our learners. It's very helpful to ask some questions, to involve them, and to really make sure that they do understand the concept. All right, next question is how. Okay, how do we ask concept check questions? How do we write good concept checking questions? And that's what the rest of this video is all about. All right, so stay tuned. Let's start off with an example. On the next slide, we have a text. It's just a short spoken text, or I guess it's transcribed. And first I should tell you that today I feel awful. I have a splitting headache. I feel nauseous. I just feel terrible. Okay, so I'd like you to read the text on the next page as if you were students and answer this question. Whose fault is it that I feel bad today? Okay, so you might want to pause the video when I change the slide just to give you time to read and answer that question. Okay. Now, you may have said that it was Sandra's fault that I am feeling bad today, and you're absolutely right. Okay, it's all her fault. If you said it was my fault that I'm feeling bad today, no, nothing to do with me. I had no choice. Okay. Just as an aside, why don't you pause the video again and just have a think, why did we do that? Why did I ask you that question, whose fault is it that I feel bad today? Okay, you may have come up with the fact that that was a gist question. It's important that we have our students comprehend any text that we use to contextualize target language before we actually look at the language itself. We don't want to kind of sneak in the target language too early. The most important thing is that students understand the context, which helps add meaning to our language. So that was just a gist question for you to get an idea of the text. Next thing we need to do, so this is a grammar lesson, okay, and our target language is right here. Should have. That's my target language. And it's within what we call a marker sentence, which is, I really should have gone home. Okay, that's our marker sentence. All right, so let's have a look now at how we can write some useful concept check questions for that target language for our students. Here's a little recipe. Okay, so first thing we need is one appropriate helping of target language, in this case, should have. We need a marker sentence, so a sentence which kind of typifies the use of this language. In this case, I should have gone home. We need a teacher, and we need some students. Okay, now this is the method that I would recommend. First of all, you've got to identify the target language. That sounds easy. And usually the course book does that for you, but it's really important that we know what it is we're trying to check. Okay? Next, we're going to write some simple statements that kind of explain or identify the meaning of that target language in simple, clear terms. Okay? Then simply going to change those statements into questions. And then once we've done that, we've got lovely, juicy CCQs that we can use again and again whenever we're teaching that language with our different groups of students. Okay, so let's have a try with should have. So there's our, do you remember what that's called? Exactly, that's our marker sentence. All right, our target language is, let's show you here, should have or should have. This is the contracted form. Okay, that's our target language, but our marker sentence is, I should have gone home. All right, so let's break that down. That's step one. We've identified the target language, should have. Next, we need to break it down into simple statements. So why don't you pause the video and write down, what does should have mean? What does should have mean? Okay, so I came up with this. It means I did not go home. And it means going home was a good idea. Yeah? All right, so now we need to step 3 is to flip those and make them into questions. Try that. Pause the video. Okay, hopefully you came up with, did I go home? And the students, if they understand the meaning of should have, which they should do from the context, they'll say no. And then, was going home a good idea? Again, if they understand, the students will say yes. It's important to write those answers on your plan so that we know you understand the target language. All right, so let's have a look at some bad concept check questions and have a think about why they're bad. So let's do this as an example together first. Let's have a look at set 1. These are bad for the same reason. Okay, so have a look. Why is that concept check question terrible? When did I change residence and move to my present abode? All right. Hopefully you'll have worked out that really it's the complexity of the language that's the problem here. Our target language is I've lived here plus 4. So I've lived plus 4 to show the duration. Now, that might be learnt by, say, maybe a pre-intermediate student, but it's unlikely that a pre-intermediate student is going to know the word abode or even change residence. They might be tricky for them. So, you know, it's important we avoid this complex language. This one is problematic for the same reason. Okay, so our target language, I wish I'd gone to the party. We might introduce that at a high intermediate level. And then we have the concept check question here, if I had my time again. Again, that's a very complex, idiomatic phrase. We don't want to use that kind of language when we're concept checking. All right, so let me give you some more different sets and you figure out, by pausing the video and thinking, making some notes, why they're bad. Okay? Here we go. Okay, so these are bad because we're not actually checking the target language. This is why step 1 of the recipe is so important, because we need to identify our target language. In this case, he's just plus the past participle. Okay, so it's the present perfect with this adverb just in the middle. So if we ask this question, has he just bought a new bicycle? We're not checking that they understand what that means. Okay, the students hearing the word bicycle, they're likely to say, no, obviously, teacher, he hasn't just bought a new bicycle, because in the first sentence it says car. So that does not check the actual target language itself. Similarly, in this one here, the target language here is the phrasal verb looking forward to, plus the ing form of the verb. And again, if the students answer holiday, we haven't really checked they understand the meaning of this as a phrasal verb, as a lexical item. Okay, we don't know that they understand, even if they get the answer right. All right, here's your next set. Again, pause it. All right, did you figure out why it's bad? Good. It's because it actually uses the target language here. Had to. Okay. Did he have to? We don't have to understand the language to get the answer right. The answer is yes. And similarly here, managed to. Did he manage to climb the mountain? Well, if they answer that question correctly, we haven't really helped them understand the meaning. Okay. Next set. You ready to pause? All right. Why are these bad? Pause. Yes, okay, so this one, what these have in common is that they don't really check that the students really understand. There might be lots of wooden things in their houses, but they don't really necessarily understand what a coffee table is. They may not even have a coffee table in their house. In the case of this one, it's an idiomatic expression, and these elements of the expression really don't contribute to the meaning as a whole. So we've looked at some bad concept checks. Now let's look at some advice for some good ones. Good concept checking questions. Okay, just take a minute to read this. You can pause the video once I've revealed all of them if you need time to process. Okay? Okay, so here are some better concept check questions for that target language that we just looked at. Again, pause the video if you need time to read. All right, so let's have a bit of practice now, see how well you can use these techniques. So here's the method again. Identify the target language. In the following examples, I've done that for you by underlining. Okay. Next, write the statements that clearly show what the target language means. And then third, make them into questions. Okay, so here we go. Again, pause the video and write some concept check questions for this target language. All right, how'd you go? So step 1, identify, we've done that. Step 2, write your statements. Here are some examples. Again, pause if you need time to read them. Okay, and the next step's really simple. We're just going to make them into questions. Here are the ones for vocabulary. And here are the ones for grammar. These are suggestions. You may have come up with different ones. What's important here is that you're very critical about how effective your concept check questions are for your learners. If they get their answers right, does that really mean that they've fully understood the language? Are they simple enough for the level of the students that you're teaching? If you're in any doubt, you can run these through with your tutor in guided lesson planning. But by the time you've taught a few times and you've actually prepared these on your lesson plan, they do become much more automatic. Some of you may have found yourself using concept check questions instinctively as you're teaching, and that's fine. Until that happens though, it's really important to write them on your lesson plan, think them through, and maybe even run them by a colleague to see if they can help you with your concept check questions. So happy concept checking. I hope that these techniques have come in useful and that you have a great time using them. All right, next is timelines.